Hey, howdy, and welcome, kids. It is time once again for Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. I'm here with producer Zoe. Howdy, Zoe.
Hey, Michael. Hi,
Hey,
listeners.
kids. We are talking about June 10th through 16th. It's a much easier both month and lunar cycle than what we've been coming out of. So it's a little bit of a quieter. This is like the
Amazing.
quietest week of the month. So this might be a slightly shorter episode. But of course, as we start every week, I appreciate the questions. Keep coming. I love that. Keep writing me questions about astrology to read in the podcast because we are going to do another one. And this is actually going to be a little bit of an instructive moment about Jupiter and Jupiter's transit through Gemini, so get your pencils out. And if you're driving, do this later. Okay, so this is from Ildiko. I certainly hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Ildiko. She writes, Dear Michael and Zoe, longtime lover of the podcast and daily emails. Can you please clarify something you said in last week's podcast? Please, it's probably now 2 or 3 weeks ago. You told us to look at our chart and that for any planets or points between 11 and 21 degrees of any sign, this is the area that will be most affected for us personally with Jupiter's upcoming retrograde. Then she goes on and says, if I have 7 of my 12 houses in between 1121 and their respective planet in my chart, I don't know what that means, nearly everything will be affected. It's like, no, you're misunderstanding the points. I'll clarify that in a moment. Am I understanding you correctly that my whole world is about to be rocked and upgraded? Not quite, because I'm going to limit your perception of what a point is. But and thank you so much for all the healing and joy you put into the world. Sincerely, Ildiko. You're welcome. I love putting joy out into the world. And let's clarify a couple of things about Jupiter and Gemini and what to expect and how to work with transiting Jupiter over the next 13 months, retrograding back and forth between 11 and 21 degrees of Gemini, where he's transiting for the next 13 months. So what I'm about to do is going to be irrelevant for all of you sort of astrologists out there who really know your own chart and know how to work with transits, even on a rudimentary level. I'm going to be completely over your head for those of you who really don't know astrology well at all and are sort of just getting used to the language and don't know how to read your chart. And so this might be that moment where you go, maybe it's time for me to learn how to read my chart, and you go take my course. But let's talk about how to work with Jupiter and Jupiter moving through Gemini and the triple transits that will be generated if you have any planets or points between 11 and 21 degrees of any sign. So what that means is because Jupiter is going to go all the way to 21 degrees of Gemini, turn around and retrograde all the way back to 11, and then repeat going over those degree points. Those are the degree point spreads where Jupiter will hit 3 times over the next 13 years. Now, to the points perspective, our friend is writing to us about all of the houses in her chart, but when I say points in astrology, we're not talking about every house cusp. There's only 4 house cusps that count when we say points. And these are the cardinal points of the natal chart, the 4 most sensitive points which we get when we know what time a person is born. And the time of birth establishes the rising sign, which is how you relate to the world and the world perceives you, and its opposite side, the descendant, what you're drawn to in relationship. And then the up and down trajectory, the bottom of the chart, that's about home and hearth, and the top of the chart, that's about professional expression and legacy and outside public life. Those are the 4 cardinal points. They happen to be the beginning of the 1st, 4th, 7th, and 10th houses. But when I say points, I mean one of those angles. Another 2 points that we would be referring to when we say points is your south node of the past and your karmic lessons, and your north node of future life purpose and where your life is going. So those are the 6 points, and any planet between 11 and 21 degrees is going to be impacted 3 times by Jupiter in Gemini. So what you want to do, and here's where you get your pencils out, right? So you mark down that you're looking for 11 to 21 as the significant point. You're going to look to the 4 cardinal points, the left-right axis, the up-down axis, the south node, the north node, and every planet. And if you have anything between those numbers of 11 and 22, that planet or point is going to receive a sense of expansion from Jupiter's transit. But the style of how you experience that will be dependent upon the geometry. So I'm going to give you a list of all of the signs and how they geometrically relate to Gemini, so that if you have a planet or point in any sign, these signs I'm about to read and the energetic quality is the sensation you can expect from the transiting Jupiter. So, of course, if you have planets in Gemini itself, it's a conjunction. So there's a direct expansion of any planets and points that you have in the sign of Gemini. Sagittarius would be the sign opposite. So that's also about expansion, but through things that are probably coming out from the other side of your life rather than internal. And there can be a little bit of Jupiter's shadow of over-the-topness in an opposition. If any of these planets or points between 11 and 21 are in Taurus or Cancer, that's a semi-sextile 30-degree relationship. You can consider those neutral and irrelevant. They're not going to be impactful. Any planets or points in Leo or Aries are going to receive a 60-degree angle. That's productivity. That's if you put the effort in, you will receive outrageous expansion in the area of consciousness that the planet or point represents. Virgo and Pisces, you're the guys who are receiving squares from Jupiter and Gemini. And so a square from Jupiter means the shadow of over the top. So it's always good stuff, air quotes, with Jupiter, but any planets or points in Virgo and Pisces are receiving it in the 90-degree angle of conflict and obstacle. That turns on Jupiter's shadow of over the top. The air signs receive this as a trine. So any planets or points in Libra or Aquarius are going to receive easy, direct expansion as a result of just life unfolding, not something you're going to have to work at or move through in a kind of conscious way, but something that will just happen as a matter of life unfolding. And the complicated signs are Scorpio and Capricorn. That's Jupiter hitting your planets or points in the great eliminator angle. And the essence of that angle is adjustments. So in those cases, Jupiter is saying you can get bigger, but you got to make room for it. So start clearing things out and making some space. Now you have everything you need to know to figure out how Jupiter Gemini is impacting your chart. So for the folks who are right at that territory where you know enough to get what I'm talking about, but not so much that you've already done this automatically, sit down with your chart and see what you can figure out. Have at it. So it's the quietest and slimmest week in the quietest month that we've had in a long time. So there's not a whole lot to talk about. And if anything, the big sort of news of the week is we start the week out with the Gemini stellium fully activated. And when we finish the week, the Gemini stellium will essentially be over. So as we start the week, we've got Mars has just moved into Taurus. We talked about that last week. So we're grounded and slower and a little more heart-centered in how we're moving and acting and deciding. That I mean, Mars has not been part of the Gemini stellium, but when Mars moved into Taurus last week, we got a little more grounded, which was helpful because in the beginning of all of this Gemini energy, the mind was a little overinflated with thought, even though there were gorgeous transits. There were many days last week where it's like, damn, my mind is just not working well because there's just too much thinking, too much Gemini, too much. So we have a week of that sort of overwhelming Gemini energy, and Mars in Taurus just slows our roll just a little bit. So we're grateful for that slower pace. But as we start the week off, we certainly still have this powerful Gemini stellium. And one of the important things that happens in Mercury's cycle in general is his regular meeting with the sun. Mercury's never very far from the sun because he's so close in orbit, and it's a speedy, fast little orbit. So from our perspective, I forget the numbers. I think it's like it's something like 28-degree span that Mercury can't be any further than like 17 degrees on either side of the sun. Which makes sense in the archetypal makeup of this. You know, the sun represents our centered conscious awareness. Everything that we can be aware of is symbolically represented by the sun shining its light on everything that we are sort of like moving through. And then Mercury zips around and is just the narrator that says, it's the sidekick in the Disney film, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, Mercury's the little coyote that hangs out with the sun god. And it's just zipping around saying, I think this, I think that, I think this, I think that. And so there's a disconnected relationship between this idea of what am I aware of and what am I thinking. Most people don't have an understanding that these are different, and we get identified with what we're thinking as who we are, when that's in fact not how it works. If you look at the solar system as a model, each one of us is that same solar system embodied. We have a central sense of I am, that is who we are, that relates to the sun. And then we have a coyote or a meerkat or some little Disney sidekick in our minds running around trying to convince us to, think about this, think about that. And on Friday, the sun and Mercury come together by conjunction. And this has some importance because it's part of the mechanism of Mercury and the sun playing out their dance of I'm aware of this, but I'm thinking that. Those are separate, but then Mercury and the sun come together in either side of Mercury's cycle, and we experience an alignment of conscious awareness and thinking. Now, when Mercury's retrograde, this becomes really important. We call it the inferior conjunction because Mercury is in front of the sun, between the Earth and the sun in a retrograde. And because Mercury's retrograde, he's in a process. He's in the unconscious. We don't know what he's working on, and our conscious awareness connects with Mercury in the underworld, and we get important revealed messages about that cycle and what the theme is of integration that we're experiencing at the individual level. Now, why I'm talking about that and Mercury's not retrograde is the same thing is happening on Friday. It's just not a hidden, shrouded process where it's really, really important we pay attention because the message we're going to be delivered is coming from the unconscious and we might miss it. So that's not the story as we move through Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. But we still have an important opportunity as we move into the weekend, focused specifically on Friday as a peak day of this, messages, guidance, awareness, aha moments. Just pay attention to your conversations and your thought processes as we inch towards the end of the week, because you might receive some important information and guidance about a conscious awareness and thought process integration that is happening as we move through this week. So as you know, I've been following Venus for the last year with great sort of enthusiasm and curiosity because the retrograde cycle of last summer was so important to us. And so if Venus went retrograde last summer in Leo, my sort of way of describing it is that as Venus moves around the entire ecliptic, which she's about to finish this up this summer. She's going to be back in Leo before too long. That everywhere she went, she delivered important information to us about how we give and receive love at the unconscious level and ways we need to work on that so that we can create more love being given and received at the unconscious level. This is why I've been talking about what Venus has been doing since last summer. And she and Mercury are doing something really interesting this weekend. They're both gathering on Saturday for their regular conjunction. Both of these planets move fairly fast, and roughly once a year, Mercury and Venus get together by conjunction. And what we experience in that moment is one of the most important regular alignments that we need to function beautifully in the world, which is to align our heart and our minds. This is one of the big challenges of being a human being in a body, is the mind can want things that the heart doesn't feel deserving of. The heart can long for things that the mind feels is too complicated to create. I could go on and on about the way in which most human beings don't have a good alignment with what they're thinking and what they're feeling. And when we line those things up, we're cooking with gas. You also can't manifest something powerfully unless what you're thinking about what you desire and how you allow your emotional body to step into the feeling game of having those things already present. You can't manifest powerfully. I mean, that's the game. The mind is the seed. I plant the seed of what I desire with my thoughts, but I water it with my feelings and my passion and my deserving expectancy. And then I can make something happen. So that's Mercury and Venus. And when they get together, we enjoy a re-upping of that alignment. And why this weekend is powerful is on Saturday, they're getting together in Gemini. The sort of culminating moment of this Gemini stellium happens on Saturday as Mercury and Venus get together at the 30th mastery anaretic degree of Gemini. So it's a standard integration moment of mind and heart. That's what the transit is. That's how we define it or interpret it. But because it's happening at the 30th mastery degree of Gemini, what's available in consciousness is everything the Gemini mansion knows about mind and heart in alignment. Everything that Venus knows about intellectually understanding feelings, which is what's available when Venus is in the air sign of Gemini, is understood at the mastery level of Gemini's capacity to have us understand our feelings intellectually. What a stunning gathering. It's kind of like Mercury's all dressed up and tarted up and in his gear, and Venus has been bathed and draped and is looking like they're at their best.
Yeah.
In the intellectual mansion of Gemini, delivering intellectually understandable information about what you need to keep your mind and heart in this kind of alignment. And then together on Sunday, between Saturday and Sunday, they both enter Cancer. So what's the message there? Venus in Cancer says, okay, now I can just come to home, close the door, feel my feelings, and see if I need any rest or restoration. Mercury in Cancer says, what do I need to orient my perceptions in the direction of the care that I might need in order to go have the things I desire to create? Right? So Mercury and Venus moving into Cancer for a couple of weeks together, then again, busts up the overly intellectual thinking, monkey mind anxiety potential mansion of Gemini. Sun's still there and Jupiter's still there, so we're still in the conscious awareness of what this mansion can bring, still lighting up the Gemini charts, the Gemini houses in all of our charts. But as of Sunday, we start a chapter of awareness, of care that's needed in order for us to prepare ourselves in a restorative kind of way to climb the mountain of our desires and create magnificent things out there in the world. But first, we do a little bit of rest and restoration. Starts this weekend. Have at it.
Did you know that Michael has a daily astro alert? If you enjoy hearing the weekly astrology, you might like knowing more about each day. When you subscribe for the daily astro alerts, you'll get an in-depth explanation of the day's astrology sent right to your email. Subscriptions are only $10 a month, or you can purchase the yearly subscription at the reduced price of $100. To subscribe, head over to michaellennox.com. All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show. Before we get into our dream interpretation, I had a freaky dream last night where someone I loved was dying.
Ooh.
And I know this theme has come up, and I know that if someone you love is dying or dies in your dream, I know it doesn't mean they're gonna die in real life, but I forgot what it does mean. Can you remind me on that?
Absolutely. And I'll start by reminding you of this. This is a great reminder for all of our listeners. Things that we would call awful in waking life are often really important symbols in dreams. And dying is one of them. We don't like when things and people die in waking life. It's sort of sad and awful. And it's one of the scariest things about being alive and in a body is that we know that death happens. But change and death are synonymous. And so a friend dying. So here's the work then, Zoe. A friend dying in a dream can reflect changes that are happening in the friendship. I call this the outer circle of interpretation, where it's just as valid to interpret the dream as reflecting the dreamer's external life, external relationships. I don't operate in that area in environments like this because half the time the dreamer's not even here. And even when they are, we've got our 12 minutes to sort of get data, right? So I don't deal with the outer circle, but it's as vibrant a place to interpret dream material as the inner one. So you can think of that. You know who you dreamt of. You can look at that friendship and see if, in fact, there's change happening there. Might the dream be helping you acclimate to those changes? The other thing to do would be to examine this friend as a character aspect of you. What does this friend represent in you? I usually do the 3 adjective request. Right? Describe this person's energy in 3 adjectives, and that's the part of you that's in a deep process of changing and transforming to itself. So you identify the quality, then you identify how that quality is in fact shifting and changing in you. And that to me is the way to interpret that dream from the inner circle consciousness.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. I love when you bring questions, Zoe.
Well, this week we have an email and dream, and it's actually tied to the myth and fairy tale class. So I thought it was a perfect timing to bring this in. This person took your class last year.
Okay, good. Hey, I'm gonna do a terrible shameless plug here. If you're hearing this podcast when it comes out, I always keep registration open 2 days after the first class. So the class just started this past weekend, and if this class and this dream sounds interesting to you, you can go to michaellennox.com and you can get a seat in this class and catch up. Shameless plug over. What's our dreamer dreaming?
Okay, Stephanie says, "Hi, Michael and Zoe. I had a wild dream and thought of you both when I woke up from it.
Love that.
This dream occurred on the morning of March 29 during the Scorpio moon, her lunar return.
Ah.
It's the middle of the night, and I'm inside my grandmother's house, and I realize my husband isn't inside the house. So I walk outside the front door and hear these noises, like a distant party is going on. I see remnants of a party in the front yard, like food trash and a fire.
Yeah.
I'm looking around trying to find my husband and figure out what's going on when I see a bucket of food near my feet. It was left for these wolves that I now spot in the dark. They are rushing towards the front door of the house, trying to get inside. They've surrounded me and have their mouths on my arm, but have not pierced through the skin yet.
Ooh.
I can't scream or they will get me. They will sink their teeth into me. I spot another bucket of fresh food for the wolves. I need to get it somehow to distract them away from me. A little kid runs out of the front door. It's a hybrid character of her brother as a child and her son. The wolves let go of my arm and are trying to rush into the house. I'm panicking and throwing the food from the bucket outside the front gate of the house to try to get them out. It's too late and they are inside the house. I'm now panicking, realizing my cats are inside and my son / me as a child are sleeping in the back bedroom. Where is my husband? I go inside trying to explain what's happening with the wolves in the house when I see my husband is lying on top of my son trying to protect him. He's crying. The son is crying. Do they have him? I can't tell. I can't see where the wolves are. I hear him crying. I think he's crying from being woken up. Then suddenly I wake up.
Wow.
She adds a little bit of background,
Okay,
which
let's hear it,
is
yep.
she grew up living at her grandmother's house as a small child.
Okay.
And grandma was a hoarder and her
Ooh.
favorite person.
Oh,
There was a
sweet.
ton of healing that she's done around traumatic experiences that occurred in the grandmother's home, particularly from sexual abuse.
So hang on. I just want to clarify. Grandmother's a favorite person,
Yes.
but a hoarder. So clearly some dysfunction. And what was that? There's so many details there, but there was also some sexual predation potential stuff
In that home.
Ah, got it.
Correct.
So grandma has
Correct.
an interesting association, both nurturing, care, favorite person, but also
Trauma.
trauma. Okay. Wow. First of all, it's the middle of the night. So we know we're in a deep, shadowy dream because it's the middle of the night. We also know that we're in early wound because we're in grandmother's house, right? So now we have a lot of information about exactly what kind of traumas might be living in there. So I want to start by declaring the thing I would declare in any dream that has animal medicine in it. The wolves are there to help. And the all of that content of trying to feed them to distract them and run away from them and get rid of the conflict is the fear of something that the dream is sort of describing as a new level of empowerment that I think is being asked of Stephanie. And here's how I know this. First of all, the party is interesting, right? So if there's partying in the distance, that tells us I'm going to call the party distraction consciousness, right? That if we're considering what's the highest integrated consciousness I can muster as a human being, trying to learn who I am and how to be in a life, party would be the opposite of that. Right. So we come out and we see, there's party in the distance. That to me says there's distraction everywhere. There was a party right there, trash, fires, etc. There was distraction right fucking here where I am. The husband's nowhere really until we find him later. To me, even that's a distraction of like, even Stephanie's like, nope, no husband. We're not in any distraction consciousness. What's happening in the soulful level is the wolves are trying to come in and support Stephanie. They're trying to enter her sense of self.
Oh, I didn't think that.
Well, because the
I wouldn't
content
have
of the
guessed.
dream is I'm scared of the wolves, I'm scared of the wolves, I'm scared of the wolves. But I've heard thousands and thousands of dreams, and everybody's always scared of the image that turns out to symbolically mean your power, your latest sort of skill set, your spiritual assistance that's trying to come through now, right?
Right.
So
right.
So what's the message of wolves? Well, wolves are matriarchal. The alpha wolf is a misnomer. It's from men watching wolves and describing it through the male gaze. What we know through science is that really that wolves are pack animals. They're matriarchal. And there's a powerful way that wolves represent what it's like to live in the natural cycles of life, right? That's the howling connected to the moon and the lunar cycle. So we have to establish, Stephanie, that the wolves want to help. They're trying to get into your psyche so that you can live more connected to your feminine power. That might partly be why the husband is nowhere to be found in the dream, because it's not a dream about sharing power or being supported in your power. It's for you. So this idea of spotting the wolves in the dark, that's the juicy moment of the dream. Remember, it's the middle of the night, so we start that we're in shadow. If then in the dark I spot the wolves, that tells me, the listener of the dream, that the powerful thing that the dream promises is right there when she spots what's in the dark, the wolves. And what are they trying to do? They're trying to get into her house. If the house is a symbol of herself, then that's a positive integration moment. They're trying to inhabit her with more pack mentality, more matriarchal mentality, more spiritual connected to the moon mentality. What's fascinating to me is the correction that happens first. That is, the wolves surround her and they put their mouths on her arms, not piercing skin to bite, but clearly giving a message.
Yeah.
Well, that's how dogs and wolves correct each other in the pack.
Oh, right. They mouth.
Yes,
They don't attack,
with
but
their
they mouth
mouth,
each other.
acting out a bite. It says, I'm not going to bite you, but best believe that this is a biteable offense. So I'm going to teach you. Don't do this, or trust me, the next time you're going to get the teeth.
Right.
This is standard wolf behavior. So then I, as the receiver of the dream, can go, oh, see what's happening? The wolves are trying to correct Stephanie's actions, not her walk. It's not her feet. It's her arms. Arms represent the things we make with our dexterity and our strength. What is Stephanie creating with her life? The wolf consciousness is trying to correct her arms, her action of creation, in the direction of being supported by spirit. But she's afraid, which is standard. So it's a beautiful dream of here's your power. You're afraid of your power. So is everybody. Let this dream help you see just how afraid you are. Even the food buckets and throwing it at them, that's more distraction consciousness. I'm going to feed my wolves with an empty bucket of food instead of with my heart and soul. So somehow then this child comes into play. Right? That this child is both her child, but also her innocent self. I'll wrap it up by saying this. Every parent is both parenting their children, but also trying to reparent themselves in doing so. That's how we parent children, by not passing on the wounds, right? I watched my sister do this, right? She's not doing conscious awareness work the way I am. I mean, she's been to therapy. She's aware, like she's done her work, but she parented her children in a way that she didn't learn from our parents. So I'm reminded of that in this, that the idea that it's her son, but it's also her. And the feminine principle piece in this dream says the best way you can help your son is to deepen your feminine power and trust that your child's father has the masculine principle taken care of. That he is not fact missing. He's right there helping her with the innocence that she's trying to cultivate. I'm getting a little lost, admit. I'm getting a little lost in this last little scene because I got so captivated by the first part of this dream. So forgive me, Stephanie, if that last little wrap-up doesn't feel as juicy, but that's to me what the dream is about. It's really about Stephanie's process of accepting and integrating her next level of spiritual mastery.
Beautiful. And I love that she's been in the fairy tale class.
Yes. And this is such a fabulous fairy tale dream. And, the wolf and Little Red Riding Hood is a huge sort of part of that story where we all have to find a way to sort of have our integrated little red, the part of us that's innocent and needs to explore, but also the part of us that's the inner wolf. Our passions and our desire to take a big, juicy bite out of life is just as important as our innocence.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.